Have you ever sat quietly and wondered, when did it all shift? One day you were the center of their world, the hand they reached for when they were scared, the lap they curled into when they were tired. And now, sometimes it feels like you're just a name on their call list. If that, you sit across from them at the table, or maybe on a video call, smiling while they talk about their day. You nod, you listen, you offer advice, sometimes money, sometimes help with the grandkids. And when the call ends, there's a silence in the room that feels heavier than before. A silence that whispers, "Did they even ask how I was doing?" It hurts, not in the sharp, dramatic way that people talk about heartbreak. It's quieter than that. It's in the way your voice sometimes catches when you speak, or how you stop yourself from asking them to come visit again because you don't want to seem needy. It's in the way you make excuses for their absence, even to yourself. They're just busy. You say, but deep down, something in you aches for a different kind of connection. And if you've ever felt that, you're not alone. There comes a point in life, especially after 60, when many of us begin to feel the weight of all the giving we've done, a lifetime of pouring ourselves into others, children, partners, friends, often without asking for much in return. And the strange thing is, it used to feel good, didn't it? The giving, it made us feel needed, useful, loved. But now, sometimes it just feels like emptying a well that no one comes to drink from anymore. I want to share something with you. Not a solution, not a formula, but a different way of being. One that starts not by demanding more from others, but by offering more gently, quietly to yourself. Let me tell you about Helen. Helen is 73, widowed 10 years now, 2 adult children, one lives nearby, the other across the country. When her husband passed, she became the glue that held the family together, holidays at her house, babysitting on weekends, helping her daughter through a divorce. And she did it all with love. But lately, Helen noticed something. The phone calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. When she needed help after a minor surgery, it was her neighbor, not her kids, who drove her to the doctor. "I don't understand," she told me once, her voice trembling. "I've always been there for them. Always. Why do I feel so invisible now?" And that question, it isn't just hers. It's echoed in the lives of countless parents, grandparents, caretakers, good people who gave their hearts and now feel like they've become part of the background. The first thing we need to do is pause, not react, not scold, just pause and notice. There's a difference between love and dependency, and there's a difference between giving from the heart and giving, because we're afraid of what will happen if we don't. Helen realized she had never once asked for anything without apologizing first. "I hate to bother you," she'd say. Or, "I'm sure you're busy, but if you have a moment," she'd shrink herself before even making the ask. That's where our journey begins. Rule number 1 isn't about boundaries or confrontation. It's about noticing when you disappear in your own story. When you erase your needs before others can. Imagine if someone you loved, your sister, your closest friend, kept giving to others and never asked for help. You'd want them to speak up, wouldn't you? You'd tell them, "You matter," too. So why can't we say that to ourselves? Helen started small. Instead of asking with an apology, she started saying, "I'd appreciate your help this week." Not a demand, not a guilt trip, just a clear, calm request. And something strange happened. Her daughter didn't resist. In fact, she was surprised. "Of course. Mom," she said, "why didn't you say something sooner?" Sometimes, it's not that they don't care. It's that we've spent so long being self-sufficient. We've trained them to think we don't need anything. But we do, not because we're weak, but because we're human. Rule 2 is something even harder. It's learning to receive without shame. Some of us, maybe you too, are so used to giving that we feel guilty the moment we take. Even something simple like a compliment. "Oh, this old sweater," we brush it off. Or when someone offers help, we say, No, I'm fine." Even when we're not. Receiving gracefully isn't weakness, it's dignity. It's allowing others the chance to give back, to feel useful. Think about it when your children were young. Didn't it feel good to be needed? To be helpful? That never really changes. When you let others show up for you, you're not being a burden. You're letting them be human. 2. Let me introduce you to Frank. Frank is 68, former high school teacher, stoic, thoughtful, kind. His son, Ryan, is a software engineer, brilliant, busy, always on the move. Frank hardly ever asks for anything. Even when his arthritis flares up, he'll say, "Don't worry, I'll manage." But inside, he misses his son. Not just the visits, the conversations, the warmth. One day, Frank took a breath and tried something new. He wrote a short letter, not an email. A real letter, and mailed it. It said, "I miss our talks. I'd love to have coffee with you. Just the two of us. No guilt. No blame. Just honesty." A week later, Ryan showed up. No fanfare. Just 2 cups of coffee. And a quiet, tender look in his eyes. "I didn't know you felt that way, Dad," he said. "I always thought you liked being on your own." Frank smiled. "I do, but that doesn't mean I don't miss you. Sometimes we need to teach people how to love us better. Not with lectures, but with truth, with presence." That's where we begin, by gently returning to ourselves, not to become someone different, but to remember who we've always been beneath the roles, the responsibilities, the years of giving. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are not too much, and you are not alone. There's something quietly painful about spending so much of your life giving, only to one day realize you've been waiting, hoping for someone to notice how tired you are. Not just physically tired, but soul tired. The kind of weariness that builds up when your love goes unacknowledged. Not because they're cruel, but because they've grown used to you always being the one who gives. Sometimes we don't even know how it happened. One day, you're helping out here and there. The next, you're doing it all and no one remembers to say thank you. You remind them about a birthday. You bring a casserole when someone's sick. You stay quiet when you're hurt. And you tell yourself, that's just what a good parent does. But deep down, you begin to wonder, when did love become so one-sided? It's not just about the phone calls, or the favors, or the lack of appreciation. It's something deeper. It's about how, over time, you may have made yourself smaller so they wouldn't feel guilty, so they'd keep coming around. Maybe you thought that by being easygoing, they'd love you more, that by never complaining, you'd stay close. But that's not closeness. That's performance, and it's exhausting. Let me tell you about Margaret. She's 70, retired nurse, heart of her church community. Margaret has 3 adult children, all living in different cities. She still sends birthday cards handwritten with little doodles on the corners and makes her famous strawberry jam every summer, shipping it in care packages with knitted socks and notes that say, "Love you always, Mom." But last Thanksgiving, none of her kids made it home. One had to work late. Another had a sick child. The third forgot to respond at all. So Margaret sat at the table, alone. The turkey still hot. The cranberry sauce still chilled. She ate in silence, telling herself it was fine. They have their own lives, she whispered. But the silence in her chest was louder than anything. The truth is, Margaret had trained them to believe she never minded. She always smiled, always covered for their forgetfulness, always put them first. And they believed her, because why wouldn't they? She never showed them the truth. And here's the heart of it. When you always pretend you're okay, no one knows when you're not. It's not about blaming them. It's about realizing how often we've abandoned ourselves. So here's a quiet shift that changes everything. Stop making yourself easy to disregard. This doesn't mean picking fights. It doesn't mean ultimatums or harsh words. It means allowing yourself to be seen not as just a helper or a cheerleader or a background figure, but as a full human being with needs, limits, and a heart that deserves care. Helen, from before, she started doing this too. She began saying no. It was hard at first. Her daughter asked her to babysit on a weekend she had plans with her walking group. Old Helen would have canceled the walk, but now she took a deep breath and said, "I've already made plans for that morning. I can do the afternoon if that helps, but I won't miss my walk." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then her daughter said, "Oh, okay. I'll make it work. Thanks for letting me know. No anger, no guilt. Just respect." And that's the third quiet rule. Start setting limits not to push others away, but to make space for your own life again. Frank began this. 2. He stopped saying yes to things that drained him. When his neighbors asked him to lead yet another church committee, he said, "I appreciate the trust, but I'm stepping back to focus on my writing, not out of spite, but because he realized he had been filling his calendar to avoid the emptiness at home. He started journaling in the mornings, walking by the lake, learning to play the harmonica, something he always wanted to do, but never gave himself permission. That's the shift. When we stop waiting for others to value us and start living like we're already valuable, there's a kind of strength that comes with this clarity. Not loud strength, not demanding, just rooted. It's when your voice gets calm, not because you're resigned, but because you've stopped begging to be seen. And when that happens, people notice. Margaret didn't stop sending love to her children, but she stopped overextending. She stopped saying, "Don't worry about me." She started saying, "I'd really love it if we could plan a weekend together soon. I miss you." She didn't say it with guilt. She said it with truth. And slowly, something changed. Her middle child, Chloe, started calling more, not because she felt pressured, but because she sensed something new in her mother's voice, a kind of quiet grace, a kind of self-worth that made her stop and really listen. You see, when you hold yourself with respect, others begin to mirror it, not always perfectly, not overnight, but they feel it, even if they can't name it. You don't need to harden your heart. You just need to let go of the story that says you must earn your place by always being agreeable. Respect doesn't come from being needed. It comes from being whole. And when you start living that wholeness, when you stop chasing their attention and start tending to your own life, it sends a ripple out into every relationship you touch. Not because you demanded it, but because you became the kind of presence that draws it. When you begin to choose yourself not out of anger, not to prove a point, but simply because your heart is worth listening to, it's like something clicks quietly into place. The world doesn't shift dramatically. The phone doesn't ring off the hook. But inside you, something settles, a kind of stillness, a strength that doesn't need to shout. It starts small. Frank. Remember him, the retired teacher with the quiet voice and distant son. After writing that letter to Ryan, after speaking his heart plainly, he didn't go back to waiting by the phone. He began to live, really live. Morning walks turned into afternoons with a local writing group. He started volunteering once a week at the library, helping kids with reading, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He started filling his own cup. That shift in energy, it was real. Ryan visited again 2 weeks later. This time, it wasn't because Frank asked. It was because Ryan wanted to see what had changed. "You seem different, Dad," he said, over tea on the porch. "Lighter." Frank smiled. "Maybe I just stopped expecting you to fill the spaces I need to fill for myself." It wasn't cold. It wasn't distant. It was honest. Ryan didn't say much at first, but the next week, he called again. And this time, he asked about Frank's writing. "Can I read something you've done?" That's the power of presence. When you stop begging for attention and start tending your own garden, people start to look over the fence. They wonder what you're growing. They come not because you pulled them, but because they're drawn to your peace. Margaret, too, found her rhythm again after years of putting herself last. She began going on weekend trips with friends from her church, a coastal drive, a quilt show, a simple weekend retreat. She wasn't waiting anymore for someone to invite her into life. She stepped into it. When Chloe visited a month later, she noticed how radiant her mother looked. "You've changed, Mom," she said, with that same awe you'd use for someone who's just remembered how to dance. "I just stopped waiting," Margaret replied, and started living. That kind of response, it's not about guilt-tripping your children. It's about showing them that you are your own person, not just their mother, their support system, their safety net, but a soul, with dreams, with laughter, with her own light. The irony is, when we stop giving everything to be loved, people begin to love us more deeply, not out of obligation, but out of connection. Because real connection doesn't come from one person emptying themselves to fill another. It comes from two whole hearts meeting in truth. Helen. From earlier, the widow with the kind eyes, she began learning watercolor. Always wanted to, never had time. Now she paints every Wednesday afternoon. She turned her guest room into a studio, small but bright, filled with sun and open windows. One day, her granddaughter Sophie came over and saw the paintings. "Grandma, you did these." Helen nodded. "I did. They're beautiful," Sophie whispered. "Can you show me how?" And in that moment, love returned not as a duty, not as a holiday visit, but as genuine interest, as connection. Helen didn't get that moment by demanding it. She created it by stepping fully into her own joy. That's what living the change means. It's no longer about proving your worth to those who forget. It's about remembering it yourself. You no longer chase after their recognition like a shadow slipping through your fingers. Instead, you become the kind of light that warms from the inside out, a steady glow that says, "I am here, I matter," with or without applause. And as that inner light grows, you begin to notice something even deeper, that the ache you carried for so long wasn't just about being overlooked, it was about you forgetting yourself in the process. That realization is tender. It might even sting at first, but it's also liberating, because now the choice is yours. You don't have to shrink so they'll stay. You don't have to give so they'll remember. You don't have to disappear so others can shine. You can be full, loud if you want, quiet if you prefer, present, alive. The fourth rule, though we haven't named it until now, is this: stop living as a supporting character in their story and return as the main character in your own. When that happens, the way others treat you shifts naturally, not because they've changed, but because your energy has, you no longer vibrate with longing or with quiet resentment. You begin to move with grace, with self-possession, with a kind of dignity that makes people pause and say, "There's something about them. I didn't see it before." But the most beautiful thing is, you saw it. You lit the candle. You carried it forward. And if you're thinking, "But what if it's too late?" Let me gently tell you this. It is never too late to come home to yourself. Your worth isn't tied to how often they visit. It isn't measured by how much you sacrifice. It lives in your being, in your breath, in your eyes when you look at the world not as someone waiting, but as someone arriving. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You only need to stand firmly in your light. You are not just what you give. You are what you are. And that is more than enough. If you've made it this far with me, thank you, truly. I don't take that lightly. I know your time is precious, and your heart even more so. Sitting through a message like this isn't easy when it touches close to home. And if it stirred something inside you, memories, regrets, quiet hopes, I want you to know, that's not a weakness. That's your spirit reminding you it's still here, still open, still growing. We've spent our lives being strong for others, haven't we? Carrying, supporting, giving, explaining, apologizing. And sometimes it's hard to admit, especially after 60, after 70, that we still have room to grow. But here you are, sitting with these truths, not running from them. That takes courage. That takes heart. I know some of you are still in the thick of it, still wondering if your children will ever really see you again, not just as mom or dad, but as a full human being with a soul, with boundaries, with dreams that didn't die just because the kids grew up. Maybe you're carrying a hurt that no one in your family even knows exists. Maybe there was a birthday missed, a phone call that never came, a promise broken years ago that you've tucked away because you didn't want to cause waves. And maybe you've been telling yourself, it's not that bad, or I should be over it by now, because that's what strong people do. But strength doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean enduring emotional loneliness just because you know how to smile through it. You're allowed to feel the ache. You're allowed to name it, and you're allowed to want more. But remember, more doesn't always mean louder. It doesn't mean confrontation. Most of the time, it just means returning to yourself with honesty. It means looking in the mirror and saying, I will not beg for love I already deserve. And you do deserve it, whether they say it or not, whether they come visit or not, whether they ever fully understand how much of yourself you gave. You are worthy, and that worth, it doesn't depend on anyone's recognition of it. It stands on its own, like a tree that still blossoms even if no one walks by to see it bloom. Some of you might be feeling a new kind of hope rising, maybe a quiet sense of possibility, like a door that's been closed for a long time is finally starting to open. If that's you, I invite you gently to walk through it. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just one small act in the direction of yourself. Sign up for that community group you've always wondered about. Say no to something that doesn't sit right in your spirit. Write that letter not to guilt someone, but to express your truth, and then release the outcome. Start painting again, or dancing, or learning, or resting. Not for anyone else, just for you. And if you've been carrying a story, something about your relationship with your children, your spouse, your family that you've never told, I want you to know this is a space where you're welcome to share it. You don't have to be polished. You don't need the perfect words. Just speak from the heart. In the comments below, I'd love to hear from you. Has your relationship with your adult children changed over time? Have you ever felt like you gave and didn't get much back? What helped you move through that pain? Or are you still moving through it now? This space isn't about judgment. It's about being seen, heard, honored, because I believe in the power of stories. Your story, not just the chapters everyone celebrates, but the quiet ones, the ones you lived through silently, the ones that shaped you. And if this message made you feel seen, even just a little, I'd love for us to stay connected. You're not walking this path alone, and I'd be honored to keep walking it with you. So, if you'd like, click subscribe. Not because I asked, but because you felt something here that mattered, something worth holding on to. This channel isn't about quick fixes or shallow advice. It's a place where truth is welcomed, where hearts can rest, and where we remind each other that age doesn't diminish our value, it deepens it. So here's my final whisper to you today. You are not here to earn love. You are here to embody it. In how you speak to yourself, in how you rise each morning, in how you stop chasing and start simply being, there is power in your presence. There is light in your stillness. And there is hope always in your becoming. I see you. I honor you. And I hope, somewhere deep within, you've begun to see yourself again too. Thank you for being here. Until next time, take gentle care of that beautiful heart of yours